Close your eyes and relax. We go back in time to the 11th century. Church bells are echoing across Europe. Prayers are rising to the skies. Christians are grieving and angry that the holy city of Jerusalem is in Muslim hands. Pope Urban II makes a historic call to mobilize this grief and anger, set out to liberate the Holy Land. God will be with you, and so the Crusades began. Hundreds of thousands of knights, soldiers, women and children set out for the holy city of Jerusalem. A long and difficult journey awaits them. Sea storms, desert heat, disease and war. Many die on the way, but they do not give up. They brave everything to reach Jerusalem and save the holy city. The Crusades were not only a war, but also a journey of faith and hope. They would change the history of Europe and the Middle East forever. Now open your eyes and get ready for this epic adventure. The excitement and mystery of the Crusades await you. Hello, dear friends, I am a wise traveler from distant lands. Today I will take you on an adventure that swept across Europe and the Middle East centuries ago. The excitement of the Crusades. The Crusades are not only a saga of battles and heroism, but also of faith, betrayal, love, and adventure. It is a saga of thousands of brave knights, greedy rulers, scheming politicians, and mysterious assassins who set out to liberate Jerusalem. Today we will turn the pages of this saga together and discover the unforgettable stories of the Crusades. Are you ready? Step back in time and listen to me. Let's walk the dusty roads of the Crusades together, uncover the secrets hidden in the shadows of the castles, and live every moment of this historic adventure. Let the roar of battles echo in your ears, knights' armor gleam in the sunlight, and love songs warm your heart. Let's dive into the spirit of the Crusades and become part of this unforgettable story. Are you ready? Let's start our story. The first crusade, the year is 1095. A churchyard in Clermont, France is packed with crowds. Thousands of knights, soldiers, nobles, and commoners are eager to hear the words of Pope Urban II. The air is tense, full of anticipation. Pope Urban takes the pulpit and begins to speak in a booming voice. Dear brothers and sisters, Christendom is in danger. The holy city of Jerusalem is in captivity at the hands of the Muslims. The graves of our ancestors are being trampled. The Holy Land is being desecrated. The crowd begins to murmur. Pope Urban continues. It is God's will that we liberate this holy city. Join the Crusades and take Jerusalem back from the Muslims. God will be with you and give you victory. The knights raise their swords and shout with enthusiastic voices, God be with us. We will liberate Jerusalem. Pope Urban holds his hand over the crowd and pronounces a blessing. The grace of God be with you. Go and be victorious. Thus began the Crusades. Pope Urban's historic speech mobilized Christians across Europe and inspired thousands to set out to liberate the Holy Land. Our time goes back to 1096, to the excitement that gripped Europe in the shadow of the First Crusade. It was a beacon of hope not only for knights and nobles, but also for the common people. Peasants and the poor were eager to join the people's crusade to save the Holy Land and atone for their sins. Two charismatic preachers, Peter the Hermit and Gottschalk, spearheaded the crusade. In their sermons, they promised God's favor and eternal paradise to those who went to Jerusalem. These promises attracted thousands of poor people and encouraged them to leave their homes, families, and everything behind. Those who joined the People's Crusade were mostly unarmed and inexperienced peasants. They suffered hunger, disease, and hardship along the way. Many perished on the way. When they reached Hungary, King Kalman was unable to control the crowds. The People's Crusade led to looting and destruction in Hungary. King Kalman arrested Peter the Hermit to force the People's Crusade to leave Hungary. The People's Crusade was defeated by the Byzantine army in Bulgaria before reaching Constantinople. Thousands of crusaders were slaughtered. This ill-planned and poorly equipped campaign ended in tragedy. The story of the People's Crusade reminds us of the horrors of war and blind faith. It had devastating consequences not only for those involved, but also for Europe and the Middle East. Our story goes back to 1096. We are in the shadow of the excitement that gripped Europe after Pope Urban's historic appeal at the Council of Clermont. This expedition held the promise of adventure and victory, not only for the poor but also for knights and nobles. The most powerful and respected nobles of Europe, such as Godfrey de Bouillon, Bohemond I, Raymond IV, began to gather their armies to join the crusade. These knights were motivated not only by their faith in God, but also by the desire to gain land and fame. After a long and difficult journey, the Crusader armies reached Constantinople. The Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos was suspicious of the Crusaders and demanded oaths from them not to attack Byzantine territory. After taking their oaths, the Crusaders left Constantinople and headed towards Anatolia. The Crusader armies were ambushed in Anatolia by the Seljuk Sultan Kilik Arslan. At the Battle of Dorylaeum, the Crusaders suffered a heavy defeat. However, this defeat did not make them give up. They continued their journey and captured important cities such as Antioch and Urfa. Finally, in 1099, the Crusader armies came to the walls of Jerusalem. The siege was long and difficult. The Crusaders were in hunger, disease, and despair. But they did not give up. Finally, on July 15, 1099, the city of Jerusalem was captured by the Crusaders. The conquest of Jerusalem was the most important achievement of the First Crusade. This victory caused great enthusiasm in the Christian world and reinforced the belief that the crusade was for a holy cause. In the first stage of the Crusades, there was an important obstacle on the road to Jerusalem, Antioch. Under the control of the Byzantine Empire, this magnificent city was like a fortress. Riches and abundance were hidden behind its walls. For the Crusaders, capturing this city meant not only opening the road to Jerusalem, but also obtaining a great booty. The year was 1097. Crusader armies, led by the Norman knight Bohemond, arrived in front of Antioch. A months-long siege began. The city walls seemed impenetrable. Hunger and disease were breaking the Crusader army. Morale was at rock bottom. At this moment of despair, a miracle happened. Firuz, an Armenian resident of the city, offered to show Bohemond a secret passage. This passage would allow the Crusaders to infiltrate the city at night. Firuz's betrayal caught the Byzantine garrison unprepared. Antioch fell to the Crusaders on June 28, 1098. However, this victory was not the expected end for Bohemond. Other Crusader leaders, who had played a major role in his struggle to capture Antioch, wanted to hand the city over to Byzantium. But Bohemond was determined to take control of the city. Not wanting to split the Crusader army, the other leaders left Antioch. Bohemond stayed behind and founded the Crusader Principality of Antioch. Bohemond's capture of Antioch significantly affected the course of the Crusades. This victory enabled the Crusaders to establish an important power center in the eastern Mediterranean. The Principality of Antioch survived until the 13th century and continued to influence the political balance in the region. The story of Bohemond is a story of courage, betrayal, and ambition. It reveals the complexities of the Crusades and the power struggles of the Middle Ages. In the shadow of the First Crusade, a brand new Crusader state was rising in the southeast of Anatolia, the Count of Urfa. This state was founded by an ambitious and courageous knight named Balduin de Boulogne and significantly influenced the course of the Crusades. Balduin was a member of a noble Norman family that joined the Crusade in 1096. He traveled with the Crusader armies across Anatolia to reach Jerusalem. Along the way, he faced many hardships, fought battles, and created heroism. The city of Urfa was an important stopping point on the Crusaders' road to Jerusalem. In 1097, when Balduin and his army arrived in Urfa, the city was ruled by the Armenian leader Thoros. Thoros allowed the Crusaders to enter the city and formed an alliance with them. Balduin, however, was determined to use Thoros' plans for his own benefit. He secretly entered the city with a group of his men, killed Thoros, and took control of Urfa on March 10, 1098. With this event, the Count of Urfa was established. During his reign as Count of Urfa, Balduin sought to expand and strengthen the region. He fought wars with his Muslim neighbors and built new castles. Urfa became an important Crusader center in the eastern Mediterranean. But Balduin's ambition put him in danger. In 1108, he was captured by Chabli, the abbey of Mosul. Even after he was released in exchange for ransom, he could not overcome his ambition and was captured again in 1118. This time the ransom could not be paid and Balduin died in captivity. Balduin de Boulogne's short life is a story of ambition, courage, and betrayal. He played an important role in the Crusades, founding the Count of Urfa. But his ambition followed him to the end and led to a tragic end. With the victory of the First Crusade, a new political map began to take shape in and around Jerusalem. After capturing the Holy Land, the Crusaders established their own kingdoms in this region. These kingdoms were among the most important political formations of the Crusades and influenced the balance of power in the region. One of the most important Crusader kingdoms was the Kingdom of Jerusalem. In 1099, the Crusaders captured Jerusalem and declared the city as the capital of their kingdom. King Godefroy de Bouillon became the first ruler of the kingdom. The Kingdom of Jerusalem became the most powerful Crusader state in the Middle East and served as a model for other kingdoms. Apart from the Kingdom of Jerusalem, other important kingdoms established by the Crusaders include Principality of Antioch, founded in 1098 by Bohemond de Hauteville. The Principality of Antioch covered an important region in northern Anatolia. Earldom of Edessa, founded in 1098 by Balduin de Boulogne. The Count of Edessa was located in the southeast of Anatolia. Counties of Tripoli, founded in 1104 by Raymond de St. Gilles. The Count of Tripoli was centered on Tripoli, an important port city on the Mediterranean coast. Count of Urfa, founded in 1098 by Balduin de Boulogne. The Count of Urfa was located in southeastern Anatolia. Kingdom of Cyprus, captured in 1191 by Richard Plantagenet from the Byzantine Empire. the Kingdom of Cyprus became one of the longest-lasting kingdoms of the Crusades. Each of these kingdoms had its own political structure and form of government. Some kingdoms had a feudal system, while others had a more centralized form of government. The Crusader kingdoms were home to complex societies made up of different ethnic and religious groups. This could lead to political and social tensions. The Crusader kingdoms were constantly at war with the Islamic world. Muslims regularly organized crusades to retake the Holy Land. These wars devastated the region and negatively affected the lives of the people. The Crusader kingdoms began to weaken in the 13th century with the rise of powers such as the Mongols and Mamluks. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was captured by the Ayyubids in 1244. Other Crusader kingdoms were also destroyed over time. By the end of the 13th century, the Crusader kingdoms, important political entities of the Crusades, had ceased to exist. Now we come to the Second Crusade in the first age of the Crusades. Edessa, an important city north of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, was an important fortress and trading center for the Crusaders. Founded in 1098 by Balduin de Boulogne, the Count of Edessa was always a threat to the Muslim powers in the region. In 1144, Zengi, the Atabey of Mosul, laid siege to Edessa. Count Jocelyn II tried to defend the city, but Zengi's army was too strong. Edessa surrendered to the Muslims on November 23, 1144. The fall of Edessa marked a turning point in the Crusades. It was the first major defeat of the Crusaders in the Holy Land and caused great panic in Europe. Pope Eugenius II ordered a crusade to retake Edessa. The Second Crusade 1147 to 1149 was an expedition to defend the Kingdom of Jerusalem and recapture the Count of Edessa. It was led by two of the most powerful leaders in Europe, King Louis II of France and Holy Roman Emperor Conrad III. Louis II, a pious and charismatic leader, joined the crusade with great enthusiasm. He made great efforts to control and motivate his army. He fell ill during the campaign and had to be separated from his army for some time. Despite this, his leadership and determination helped to keep the morale of the Crusaders high. An experienced soldier and commander, Conrad I was the greatest strength of the Crusader army. He led his army in a disciplined manner and won many important battles. However, he fell out with the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Komnenos, and this delayed the Crusaders' advance. Nevertheless, Conrad II's military skill played an important role in the success of the crusade. Although Louis II and Conrad I had different leadership styles, they had a common goal: protect the Kingdom of Jerusalem and retake the counties of Edessa. In the shadow of the Second Crusade, a drama was unfolding that would decide the fate of the Middle East: the siege of Damascus. Determined to capture Damascus before reaching Jerusalem, the Crusader armies laid siege to the city on July 24, 1148. This siege was not only a battle, but also a test of will, faith, and endurance. The Crusaders fought with great fervor to capture the city. They built siege towers, dug trenches, and rained arrows down on the city. But Damascus' defenses were also strong. The people of the city were determined to resist under the courageous command of their leader Mujir al-Din Gokbori. Gokbori not only organized the defense of the city, but also used various tactics against the Crusaders. He organized surprise raids, cut off the Crusaders' supply lines and went to great lengths to protect the city's water sources. As the siege dragged on for months, the Crusaders began to suffer from hunger, disease, and exhaustion. The summer heat and drought took their toll even more. Divisions and tensions also arose within the army. Some leaders insisted on continuing the siege, while others argued that retreat was a better idea. This made coordination of the siege difficult and demoralized the Crusaders. The clock was ticking against the Crusaders. The city's food and water supplies were dwindling, but the Crusaders still had not made any progress. Finally, King Louis II and Holy Roman Emperor Conrad III decided that it was pointless to continue the siege. On September 25, 1148, the Crusader armies began their retreat from Damascus. The failure of the siege of Damascus was one of the greatest disappointments of the crusade. It demoralized the Crusaders and negatively affected the rest of the crusade. The Crusader armies had to turn back before reaching Jerusalem, and their plans to recapture the counties of Edessa fell through. Thus, the Second Crusade came to an end. And we come to the Third Crusade. The year 1187 saw an event that would change the fate of the Middle East forever. Jerusalem had been in the hands of the Crusaders for almost 90 years. But the Holy City was about to be recaptured by the determined army of Saladin Ayyubi. Saladin Ayyubi was a powerful leader who united Egypt and Syria. His goal was to drive the Crusaders from the Holy Land and restore the flag of Islam in Jerusalem. In the summer of 1187, he led his army on an expedition to Jerusalem. The Crusaders were caught unprepared for these developments. In the historic battle known as the Battle of Hittin, Saladin Ayyubi's army inflicted a crushing defeat on the Crusaders. This victory paved the way for the conquest of Jerusalem. On September 20th, 1187, Saladin Ayyubi's army laid siege to the city. During the siege, both sides showed great courage and heroism. But Saladin Ayyubi's army was stronger, and the Crusaders defending the city began to suffer from starvation and disease. On October 2nd, 1187, Jerusalem surrendered. Saladin Ayyubi became the first Muslim commander to enter the city. This event caused great shock and panic in the Crusader world. The loss of Jerusalem meant the fall of one of the most important Crusader strongholds in the Holy Land. Saladin Ayyubi showed great tolerance towards Muslims and Christians who entered the city. He ordered Christians to respect the holy sites and allowed many Christians to stay in the city. This attitude engraved Saladin Ayyubi in history as a just and merciful leader. The conquest of Jerusalem significantly affected the course of the Crusades. After this event, the Crusaders could not be as strong as before in the Holy Lands. The recapture of Jerusalem was a great victory and a source of morale for the Islamic world. The Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192, was a major campaign to retake Jerusalem from the Muslims. It was led by two of the most powerful leaders in Europe, King Richard I of England with the Lionheart and Holy Roman Emperor Friedrich Barbarossa. The participation of these two leaders gave the campaign great power and prestige. A courageous, charismatic, and brilliant leader, Richard I joined the crusade with great enthusiasm. He was known for his great fighting prowess and leadership skills. He was one of the most important forces in the Crusader army and won many important battles. His duels with Saladin Ayyubi became legendary. Friedrich Barbarossa, an experienced soldier and commander, was the greatest power of the Crusader army. He led a large army and managed the logistics and organization of the Crusader army. Unfortunately, he drowned in a river during the campaign, and his death was a great loss for the Crusaders. Although Richard I, the Lionheart, and Friedrich Barbarossa had different leadership styles, they had a common goal to retake Jerusalem and restore Crusader control of the Holy Land. The Third Crusade did not last long. Its final act took place on September 7th, 1191 at the Battle of Arsuf. It was one of the largest and most important battles between the Crusaders and the Muslims. On one side was the Crusader army led by Richard I, the Lionheart, in a last-ditch effort to retake Jerusalem. On the other side was the powerful Muslim army led by Saladin Ayyubi. The battle raged fiercely from sunrise to sunset. Both sides showed great courage and heroism. Saladin Ayyubi's army had numerical superiority over the Crusaders. But Richard I, the Lionheart, showed outstanding leadership at the most critical moments of the battle and led the Crusader army to victory. The Battle of Arsuf was an important victory for the Crusaders. It broke the invincibility of Saladin Ayyubi's army and boosted Crusader morale, but the Crusaders still had not retaken Jerusalem. After the battle, Richard I, Lionheart, and Saladin Ayyubi signed the Treaty of Jaffa. This treaty gave the Crusaders the right to control some port cities on the Palestinian coast. It also allowed Christian pilgrims to visit Jerusalem. The Treaty of Jaffa marked the official end of the Third Crusade. It marked the failure of the Crusaders' attempt to retake Jerusalem. However, it was a significant gain for the Crusaders by allowing Christian pilgrims to visit Jerusalem. Thus we come to the Fourth Crusade. In the early 13th century, enthusiasm for a new crusade was already rippling through Europe. Jerusalem was still in Muslim hands and Christians were eager to retake the Holy City. But this expedition would be different from the others. With an unexpected turn, the Fourth Crusade would become an adventure that would change the fate of Europe forever. There were many reasons for the crusade, but I think I should mention a few. The failure of the Third Crusade. The Third Crusade was a great attempt to retake Jerusalem, but it ended in complete disappointment for the Crusaders. Saladin Ayyubi's army managed to defeat the Crusaders and Jerusalem remained under Muslim control. The passion of Pope Innocent III, Pope Innocent III was deeply committed to the Crusades. He wanted to organize a new campaign to retake Jerusalem and restore the prestige of Christianity. Eastern Mediterranean trade routes. One of the driving forces behind the Fourth Crusade was the trade routes. Venetian merchants wanted to gain control over the Eastern Mediterranean trade routes. The crusade was seen as an opportunity to achieve this goal. And finally, in 1202, Pope Innocent III called on all of Europe to join a new crusade. Tens of thousands of knights and soldiers heeded the call and set out to join the crusade. The spring of 1204 was a turning point in the history of Europe and the Middle East. In an unexpected move, the armies of the Crusade laid siege to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. This siege was not just a battle, but a historic event that marked the end of a civilization and paved the way for the emergence of a new order. The Crusaders had set out to recapture Jerusalem from the Muslims, but the political games of Venetian merchants and the Pope's ambition turned this holy expedition into an unexpected adventure. The Crusaders chose to attack Constantinople and sack the city. This decision would forever change the course of the Crusades and radically affect relations between Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. The siege lasted for months. The Byzantines, despite being outnumbered, heroically defended the city. But in the face of the determination of the Crusaders and the power of the Venetian ships, they were finally forced to give up. On April 13th, 1204, the Crusaders entered the city and a savage sack began. For 1,000 years, Constantinople had been the most important center of Christianity and the capital of the Byzantine Empire. The city was known for its wealth, culture, and splendor. But this splendor was destroyed when the Crusaders sacked it. Churches, palaces, and houses were looted. Works of art and valuables were stolen. Thousands of people were slaughtered or taken captive. The looting continued for days. The city was a living hell. The barbarity of the Crusaders shocked not only the Byzantines but the entire Christian world. Even Pope Innocent III condemned this atrocity and excommunicated the Crusaders. But it was too late. Constantinople was irrevocably destroyed. The Byzantine Empire had collapsed and a new order was born. The Crusaders established a new empire in the city they had sacked. This empire was called the Latin Empire. Baldwin I, Count of Flanders, was elected the new emperor and crowned in Hagia Sophia. The Latin Empire was able to control only a part of Byzantine territory, but it became an important political and commercial power in the Eastern Mediterranean. The sack of Constantinople went down in history as one of the greatest and most tragic events of the Middle Ages. It not only marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, but also forever changed relations between East and West. The barbarism of the Crusaders caused great anger against Christians in the East, an anger that led to the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. In 1204, in an unexpected move, the armies of the Crusade besieged Constantinople and sacked the city. This event led to the fall of the Byzantine Empire and the establishment of the Latin Empire. But the Byzantines did not give up. They held out for years and finally managed to retake Constantinople in 1261. This victory was an important turning point in Byzantine history and marked the end of the Latin Empire. Weakness of the Latin Empire from its inception. The Latin Empire suffered from political divisions and internal conflicts. Different factions and nobles fought for control over the empire. This weakened the empire and made it vulnerable to external threats. The sack of Constantinople dealt a major blow by collapsing the economy of the Latin Empire. The city lost its former wealth and prosperity and fell into poverty. This led to popular discontent and a loss of confidence in the empire. From the day it was founded, the Latin Empire faced attacks from neighboring states such as Bulgaria and the Empire of Nicaea. These attacks further weakened the empire and threatened the security of Constantinople. Byzantine resistance in 1204, when Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, fell, many Byzantine nobles and nobility fled to Anatolia and founded a new state. This state was called the Empire of Nicaea. The Empire of Nicaea was considered the legitimate successor of Byzantium, and for many years it was the center of resistance against the Latin Empire. The Empire of Nicaea grew stronger over time and won a series of military victories against the Latin Empire. These victories boosted the morale of the Byzantines and fueled their hopes of retaking Constantinople. The Empire of Nicaea fought against the Latin Empire not only militarily but also diplomatically. It managed to isolate the empire by forging alliances with European states and attracting allies of the Latin Empire. Liberation of Constantinople, Michael VIII Palaiologos, who became the head of the Empire of Nicaea in 1259, was a decisive and capable leader. Palaiologos was determined to take back Constantinople and was ready to use any means to achieve this goal. In 1260, Hulagu Khan, grandson of the Mongol Emperor Genghis Khan, led an expedition to Anatolia and captured important cities such as Aleppo and Mosul. This weakened the Seljuk Empire, an ally of the Latin Empire, and gave the Byzantines an advantage. On July 25, 1261, the Byzantine army led by Michael VIII Palaiologos launched a surprise attack on Constantinople. The city walls were weak, and the Latin Empire army was caught off guard. After a short battle, the Byzantines managed to enter the city, and Baldwin II, the last emperor of the Latin Empire, was taken prisoner. And so we come to the next crusade. The story of the Fifth Crusade is full of brave leaders and heroic armies. One of these heroes was King Andrew II of Hungary. A pious king and an ambitious leader, Andrew II set out with an entire army to take back the Holy Land from the Muslims. This expedition was not only a religious mission, but also a political move and an opportunity to show Hungary's strength. Andrew II's army was one of the largest and most powerful in Europe. Thousands of experienced knights, infantry, and archers set out, equipped with the latest weapons and equipment. The strength and determination of this army would significantly influence the course of the crusade. King Andrew II participated in the siege of Acre, contributing to one of the most important victories of the crusade. The siege was long and difficult, but Andrew II and his army did not give up. Eventually the city fell and Acre fell under Christian control. This victory was a great morale booster for the Crusaders and helped them to maintain their presence in the Holy Land. Andrew II's influence was not limited to Acre. He also played an important role in the signing of the Treaty of Jaffa. This treaty declared a truce between the Crusaders and the Muslims and secured the presence of Christians in the Holy Land. Andrew II's diplomatic skills and political power were vital to the signing of this treaty. Andrew II's participation in the crusade not only increased the prestige of Hungary, but also changed the political balance in Europe. It consolidated Hungary as a strong and important power and made Andrew II one of the most important leaders in Europe. The story of Andrew II is a story of courage, faith, and leadership. As a pious king, he set out to reclaim the Holy Land and, through his heroic efforts, significantly influenced the course of the crusade. Andrew II's heroism and leadership will forever be etched in Hungary's history and leave a lasting mark on the political and religious landscape of Europe. The Fifth Crusade was characterized by heroic victories as well as cruel defeats. One of these defeats was the attack on Egypt. Having recaptured Jerusalem from the Muslims, the Crusaders planned to seize Egypt to consolidate their victory and cement their hold on the Holy Land. However, in the face of the desert geography of the Nile River and the heroic resistance of the Egyptian army, the Crusaders' dreams were dashed, and this attack became one of the turning points of the crusade. The Crusaders' decision to attack Egypt was based on many reasons. Controlling Egypt was vital to ensure the security of Jerusalem. At the same time, Egypt was a rich trade center, and conquering it would give the Crusaders great economic power. Conquering Egypt would also strengthen the Crusaders' religious beliefs and political prestige. However, the Crusaders were caught unprepared by the harsh geography of Egypt and the strong resistance of the Egyptian army. The width and current of the Nile River made it difficult for the Crusader army to advance. Food and water shortages, diseases and weather conditions demoralized and weakened the Crusaders. Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt, managed to repel the Crusaders' attacks by skillfully leading his army. As the war dragged on, despair grew among the Crusaders. Most of the army had died of disease and battle or had been taken prisoner. The rest were desperate to return home. Finally, the Crusader leaders were forced to sign an agreement with Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt. According to this agreement, the Crusaders would get their prisoners back and could return to Jerusalem. But their dreams of capturing Egypt were dashed. The failed attack on Egypt significantly affected the course of the crusade. It weakened the Crusaders' position in the Holy Land and increased the prestige of Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt. The failure also led to a loss of faith in the crusade and a decline in support in Europe. In the shadow of the Third Crusade, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II took a different path. Instead of powerful armies, he was determined to find a way to win back Jerusalem using his intelligence and diplomacy. This made him one of the most interesting and mysterious figures of the crusade. Frederick's motivations were complex. The crown of Holy Roman Emperor imposed a religious responsibility on him, and taking back the Holy Land from the Muslims was part of that responsibility. At the same time, this success would give him great power and prestige in Europe and the Middle East. As a devout Christian king, Frederick also believed that taking back the Holy Land was a religious duty. But Frederick faced many obstacles. He was in constant conflict with the Pope, which made it difficult for him to join the crusade. In addition, the Crusader armies had suffered a major defeat in the attack on Egypt, and Jerusalem was still under Muslim control. Frederick decided to use his intelligence and diplomacy to overcome these difficulties. He managed to convince the Pope and obtained a temporary excommunication from him. He then started secret negotiations with Al-Kamil, the Ayyubid Sultan of Egypt. These negotiations were long and difficult, but eventually both sides reached an agreement. According to the agreement, Jerusalem would be under Christian control for a certain period of time, and the Crusaders would be able to make pilgrimages to the city. Frederick was able to take Jerusalem without a fight, an important achievement in the history of the crusade. Frederick's success ushered in a period of temporary peace in Jerusalem. Christians were able to make pilgrimages to the city, and peace and prosperity reigned in Jerusalem for a time. Frederick's growing prestige made him one of the most important leaders of the crusade. But this peace was not lasting. After Frederick's death, Jerusalem fell back under Muslim control, and the crusade ended in failure. Nevertheless, Frederick's diplomatic triumph left an unforgettable mark on the history of the crusade and succeeded in bringing peace to Jerusalem, if only for a time. In the shadow of the Third, Fourth, and Fifth Crusades, the Holy Land was still under Muslim control. The dream of retaking Jerusalem was becoming increasingly distant, and despair prevailed in the Christian world. But in 1228, after the death of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, the idea of organizing a new crusade was rekindled. It was to be a last glimmer of hope to liberate the Holy Land. The death of Frederick II meant that Jerusalem fell back into Muslim hands, causing great sadness in the Christian world. But with this sadness, the desire to save the Holy Land was rekindled. The Ayyubid state's internal strife and political instability increased the Crusaders' chances of regaining control over these lands. Pope Gregory IX took advantage of this situation and called on Christians to join a new crusade. He believed that this crusade was an opportunity to take back Jerusalem and weaken the Ayyubid state. The leaders of the Sixth Crusade included Frederick II's son Conrad, the French nobleman Theobald Champagny, and Pierre de Courtenay, Emperor of the Latin Empire. These leaders were united by the common goals of recapturing Jerusalem, weakening the Ayyubid Empire, and protecting the Christian population in the Holy Land. But there were many obstacles to this campaign. The Crusader armies lacked unity and cohesion and pursued different political interests. The Ayyubid armies were also very strong and ready to confront the Crusaders. Despite these difficulties, the Crusaders tried to advance towards Jerusalem. However, they were defeated by the Ayyubid armies, and their attempt to retake Jerusalem ended in failure. The Sixth Crusade ended in disaster for the Crusaders. This failure was one of the factors that led to the weakening of the Crusade and the end of the Christian presence in the Holy Land. After the Sixth Crusade, the Crusades declined in importance and influence. The dream of recapturing the Holy Land gradually faded, and Christians lost hope of dominating it. In the turbulent history of the Crusades, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II stands out as an extraordinary leader and visionary commander. Unlike other Crusader leaders, Frederick managed to retake Jerusalem not with his armies, but with his intelligence and diplomacy. This makes him one of the most interesting and mysterious figures in the history of the Crusade. It is difficult to cite a single reason that drove Frederick to this arduous task. The crown of Holy Roman Emperor imposed a religious responsibility on him, and taking back the Holy Land from the Muslims was part of that responsibility. At the same time, it would give him great power and prestige in Europe and the Middle East. As a devout Christian king, Frederick also believed that taking back the Holy Land was a religious duty. Frederick faced many obstacles. He was in constant conflict with the Pope, which made it difficult for him to join the crusade. The Crusader armies had suffered a major defeat in the Third Crusade, and Jerusalem was still under Muslim control. The Ayyubid Empire was also one of the most powerful states in the Middle East at the time, and was ready to confront the Crusaders. Frederick decided to use his intelligence and diplomacy to overcome these difficulties. He managed to convince the Pope and obtained a temporary excommunication from him. He then started secret negotiations with the Ayyubid Sultan of Egypt, Al-Kamil. These negotiations were long and difficult, but eventually both sides reached an agreement. According to the agreement, Jerusalem would be under Christian control for a certain period of time, and the Crusaders could make pilgrimages to the city. Muslims would also be allowed to make pilgrimages to Jerusalem at certain times. There would be no war between the two sides for the duration of the agreement. Frederick succeeded in capturing Jerusalem without a fight, an important achievement in the history of the Crusade. It proved Frederick's diplomacy and intelligence. The treaty ushered in a temporary period of peace in Jerusalem. Christians were able to make pilgrimages to the city in peace, and prosperity reigned in Jerusalem for a time. Frederick's increased prestige made him one of the most important leaders of the crusade. But this peace was not lasting. After Frederick's death, Jerusalem fell back under Muslim control and the crusade ended in failure. Nevertheless, Frederick's diplomatic victory left an unforgettable mark on the history of the crusade and succeeded in bringing peace to Jerusalem, if only for a time. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II is one of the most contradictory figures in the history of the Crusades. On the one hand, he was the only leader who succeeded in retaking Jerusalem, and thus gained great respect among the Crusaders. On the other hand, his conflict with the Pope, his collaboration with the Muslims, and his delays and hesitations caused deep divisions among the Crusaders. The story of this complex leader reminds us of the complexity of war, diplomacy, and leadership, and how morally challenging choices can be faced. Frederick's rule was based on a series of controversial methods that led to divisions among the Crusaders. His constant conflict with the Pope made it difficult for him to participate in the crusade and led to confrontation among the Crusaders. His collaboration with the Muslims, on the other hand, caused a huge backlash among the Crusaders and raised doubts about Frederick's religious beliefs. Moreover, his long hesitation and delays in joining the crusade were interpreted by some Crusaders as not being willing enough and not taking all the necessary steps to fulfill the mission. Frederick's conflict with the Pope is one of the most important events that overshadowed the crusade. The roots of this conflict lie in Frederick's challenge to the Pope's authority as Holy Roman Emperor and his desire to expand his own political power. The Pope, in turn, accused Frederick of disobedience and excommunicated him. This divided the crusade and weakened Frederick's leadership. Frederick held secret negotiations with the Ayyubid Sultan of Egypt, Al-Kamil, to retake Jerusalem and reached an agreement with him. According to this agreement, Jerusalem would be under Christian control for a certain period of time and the Crusaders would be able to make pilgrimages to the city. Muslims would also be allowed to make pilgrimages to Jerusalem at certain times. There would be no war between the two sides for the duration of the treaty. Frederick's cooperation with the Muslims caused a great outcry among the Crusaders and raised doubts about Frederick's religious beliefs. Some Crusaders argued that Frederick had chosen to compromise with the Muslims rather than fight them, and that this undermined the aims of the crusade. Frederick hesitated for a long time to join the crusade, which tried the patience of the Crusaders. Some Crusaders felt that Frederick was not eager enough to retake the Holy Land and did not take all the necessary steps to fulfill his mission. There could be various reasons for Frederick's delays and hesitations. His conflict with the Pope may have made it difficult for him to join the crusade. In addition, Frederick's political interests in Europe may also have influenced his participation in the crusade. Frederick's controversial rule led the Pope to excommunicate him and attempt to depose him from the throne of the Holy Roman Empire. In 1245, Frederick was deposed by the Pope and replaced by his son Conrad. But Frederick did not give up. He fought against the Pope and managed to regain his throne in 1250. But this victory was short-lived. Frederick died in 1254, and his throne passed back to his son Conrad. Now that we have left the Great Crusades behind, we can move on to the smaller crusades organized after the 13th century. The last act of the Crusades' 13th century declining excitement and shifting balances. The death of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II and the failure of the Crusade changed the course of the Crusades forever. The 13th century saw the last gasps of these holy wars and a dramatic shift in the political balance between Europe and the Middle East. Frederick's charismatic leadership and diplomatic skills gave the Crusades a new ray of hope. By succeeding in retaking Jerusalem, he had earned great respect among the Crusaders and demonstrated his determination to fulfill this sacred mission. But after his death, enthusiasm for the Crusades in Europe waned. The Pope tried to revive this holy war, but his attempts did not achieve much success. The armies participating in the Crusades were disorganized and weak, and failed to make significant progress in the Holy Land. Other 13th century Crusades also failed to repeat Frederick's success. In the Sixth Crusade, the attempt to retake Jerusalem ended in failure. Plans to conquer Egypt and Tunisia in the Seventh and Eighth Crusades also failed. The Ninth Crusade failed to protect Acre, and the important city soon fell back into Muslim hands. These failed campaigns led to disappointment and demoralization among the Crusaders. The failure of the Crusades led to a significant change in the political balance between Europe and the Middle East. Despite the weakening of the Ayyubid state, Muslims maintained their dominance in the Holy Land. The Crusaders, on the other hand, lost their political and military power in the region. This situation also affected the balance of political power in Europe, and new kingdoms and empires began to come to the fore. Towards the end of the 13th century, European appetite to join the Crusades declined further. In 1291, the fall of Acre marked the de facto end of these holy wars. The Crusaders had given up hope of retaking the Holy Land and began to focus on their own political and religious affairs in Europe. At one time, knights from Europe had flocked to the Holy Land. They seized Jerusalem and other holy cities on the pretext of the Holy War. But these new kingdoms did not last long. A power from the east was on the rise, the Mamluks. This army of slave soldiers was ruthless and disciplined in battle. They conquered Egypt and quickly became the most powerful state in the Middle East. The Crusaders, on the other hand, suffered defeat after defeat against the Mamluks. The siege of Acre was long and arduous. The Mamluks kept the city under siege for months. The Crusaders fought heroically to defend the city. But eventually the Mamluks managed to enter the city, and Acre fell. This victory marked the end of the Crusades, and Jerusalem fell back into Muslim hands. Mamluk rule in the Middle East was consolidated. The Crusaders had gathered a large army to take back Palestine. The Mamluks ambushed this army in the Marjayan Valley. The battle was fierce, but in the end the Mamluks were victorious. This victory marked the end of the Crusades once and for all, and the Crusader states were destroyed one by one. The kingdom of Jerusalem was captured by the Mamluks in 1244, the Principality of Antioch in 1268, the Count of Tripoli in 1289, and the Kingdom of Acre in 1291. And thus the Crusaders were officially cleansed from the Middle East. Although the Crusades are over, they left a deep and lasting mark on Europe and the Middle East. These traces are still felt even today. The Crusades helped spread new ideas and technologies in Europe. Crusaders brought spices, silk, and other goods from the Middle East to Europe. This contributed to the development of trade and urbanization in Europe. However, these changes also shook the feudal order in Europe. The knights who participated in the Crusades gained large amounts of money and land. This made them more independent of kings and contributed to the weakening of the feudal system. Unfortunately, the Crusades also led to an increase in anti-Semitism in Europe. The Crusaders accused many Jews of collaborating with Muslims and massacred them. This was the beginning of a long history of hatred and discrimination against Jews in Europe. The Crusades led to political instability and division in the Middle East. The Crusades led to the destruction of many states in the Muslim world and the creation of new ones. This led to a long period of political instability in the Middle East. The Crusades also increased enmity and hatred between Muslim and Christian peoples. The Crusades marked the beginning of centuries of religious wars. This situation prevented a long-lasting peace and stability in the Middle East. The destructive impact of the Crusades was not limited to politics. The Crusaders sacked and destroyed many Islamic cities. This caused great damage to Islamic culture and civilization. The legacy of the Crusades is the basis of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism that persists to this day. The enmity and hatred between Muslim and Christian peoples that emerged during the Crusades is the basis of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism that continues to this day. The political instability and division that emerged during the Crusades is an ongoing problem in the Middle East today. It is an obstacle to dialogue and understanding between different religions and cultures. The clash of religion and culture that emerged during the Crusades remains an obstacle to dialogue and understanding between different religions and cultures today. We have come to the end of a long and arduous journey, exploring together the complex and contradictory story of the Crusades, events that affected Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa for centuries, leaving a deep mark on religion, politics, economics, and culture. These campaigns, which started with the Crusaders' desire to capture Jerusalem and protect the Holy Land, took on different dimensions over time. Political power struggles, economic interests, and religious fanaticism complicated the motivations of these holy expeditions. The results of the Crusades were also complex. Jerusalem was temporarily under Christian control, but this did not last. The campaigns increased trade and cultural interaction between Europe and the Middle East. But they also caused great destruction and loss of life. When we look at the Crusades today, we see them not only as a series of historical events, but also as a complex legacy that affects the world today. Understanding this legacy is important to foster dialogue and understanding between different cultures and faiths. In sharing the story of the Crusades, we have not only witnessed history, but also explored the darkest and brightest sides of humanity. This exploration has brought with it feelings of hope and fear for the future. I hope this video has given you a deeper insight into the Crusades. I believe that we should learn from these events throughout history and strive to build a more just and peaceful world. Thank you for watching my video and contributing with your comments. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next historical journeys. See you in the next video. Best regards.